Hello and welcome to the Westveil Archives. My name is Jenna. I am an author-illustrator from Newfoundland, Canada, and this is my booktube/authortube channel. You may also know me from my art channel, Jenna Gets Creative. Today I am doing the tarot card book tag. This tag was created by Luly Hernandez. I was tagged by Mariah M. Thank you so much for tagging me. I will link her channel down below. You are welcome to tag me in your book tags, whether you're doing them on YouTube, on Facebook video, on your blog, whatever. Feel free to tag me. I do have two conditions if you want to tag me. First, I'm allowed to tag you back. Second, you let me know so that I can actually find it and go do it in a reasonable amount of time. Also, feel free to tag me in book-related giveaways and writing-related giveaways anywhere on social media. They often want you to tag somebody, they want a non-private account, and they want one that's relevant to the thing that they're doing, books, writing. Feel free to use me under the condition that I can also tag you. I will be tagging a few people. I recently asked on Twitter mostly who's willing to be tagged, and I got a lot of responses. I'm only going to tag a few. If you recently told me that you do want to be tagged and I haven't tagged you in today's video or in the coffee book tag I just did, your name is coming up very soon, I promise. I'm trying to spread it out. I'll have the people I'm tagging at the end of the video. The questions in this tag are based on 10 cards from the major arcanum, and they are quite the thought-provoking questions. It took a while for me to come up with my answers. The first question is The Fool, a book that brings back nostalgic memories. I pick Lois Lowry's Number the Stars. This one and The Giver I got at the same time, probably about second grade. There used to be this kind of traveling show that would come around ahead of the scholastic book fairs, and they would do assemblies and they would do plays based on some of the titles that were being featured in the upcoming book fair. And I got this one because it was a 2-pack along with The Giver. And the teaser they gave for The Giver was just so not what The Giver ended up being about. I was disappointed. But I ended up falling in love with this one, and I read this one so many times. This is the story of a Jewish girl who is trying to escape the Germans, the Nazis, during World War II. It's set in Denmark, and a family takes her in and hides her in plain sight because this family has one daughter who doesn't live with them anymore and happens to have darker hair than everybody else in her baby pictures. So they use those baby pictures and that darker hair to prove to these Nazis that are patrolling that this is their third daughter. The story itself is only 132 pages. The font's pretty big. You can get through this in an afternoon. Easy. Number 2. Pick a main character that is very goal-oriented or very focused. I picked Dr. Pete Hobson from Robert J. Sawyer's The Terminal Experiment. This is one of his earlier novels. It's hard sci-fi, but it's also mystery, and this was originally published in 1995. This is not the original cover. This is the 2002 reprint. It's got the embedded sticker printed right in there saying that it is a Nebula Award winner best novel. Robert Sawyer has now won all the awards for science fiction and fantasy, and he holds the Order of Canada. Amazing guy. So it's not necessarily Hobson himself who is the goal-oriented character that I'm referring to. In this book, this doctor, he is experimenting with immortality and the continuation of the human spirit beyond our flesh and blood bodies and our earthbound lives, and he's created 3 computer simulation versions of himself. One of them represents life after death. All of the memories of his physical existence have been removed. One of them is meant to simulate living forever, and this simulation, just the knowledge of the fact that aging and death happens have been edited out of the simulation. And the third one is just supposed to be a control. It's just the unmodified Dr. Hobson. The problem is that there's a worldwide power outage and weird things start happening with things like computer simulations, And the computer simulation personalities, copies of Hobson, are on the loose now, and it turns out one of them is a killer. Number 3, The Empress. Pick a book with a strong motherly figure. I had a hard time picking a novel for this one, honestly. My collection must be inspired by Disney. There's not many mothers, and the ones that are there kind of suck. So I ended up picking The Fairy Godmother by Mercedes Lackey. This is one of her A Tale of 500 Kingdoms stories. I believe it is chronologically meant to be the first one. If you haven't heard me rave about the 500 Kingdoms novels, I'll just sum up what I love about them so much. This is basically medieval Europe, but in this other world where there is a magic called the tradition. And if something about you or your life situation fills a fairy tale trope, that's your life now, and if you resist, the tradition is gonna do something about it. It's gonna force you into that role, whether you like it or not. And in this one, we have a character who is destined to be the fairy godmother of one of these 500 kingdoms. It's her story coming into her own, coming into her role, and being mentored by another fairy godmother. Number 4, The Lovers. Pick a book with your favorite relationship. Normally, I would say The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. It fits so many of these questions in these book tags, but I say it so much, I'll pick another one. This is the first in the Ouroboros cycle by G.D. Falkson. This is a monsters coming of age story. I have talked a little bit about this series in a few other videos and in some Instagram posts, but if you're not familiar, this is a lengthy series that Falkson is writing. It's meant to be a long series with a big arc that ties in together, but also every 3 novels are meant to be a smaller trilogy arc in and of themselves. I've only read the first trilogy. From what I understand, a lot of these characters continue on into 4 and 5. He's only written 5 so far. I discovered Falkson because of his steampunk stuff. I prefer the vampire historical fictions a lot more. This is Babette, also known as Varanus, and when we meet her, she's just your basic, Victorian age, possibly older than that, French debutante. She's being presented at a party on her family's property, and she meets and falls in love with a German baron named Corbinian. They don't know each other very long before he's murdered. And for the rest of the story, she's gone off and become a vampire. She's invited to become a vampire. She's invited to be transformed by these Eastern European vampires and live forever and escape this awful life that she's now going to live as this spoiled debutante, because she did get pregnant and have a son. And the ghost of her fiancé, who died too soon, Corbinian, is with her, and only she can see him and talk to him. And she tries to hide that fact from everybody except one vampire friend, because she thinks that everybody will think she's crazy, and she's right. They are such a sweet couple, and I love all the parts where Corbinian tries his best to make her laugh because he knows how silly it'll make her look to everybody else. Number 5, Justice. Pick a book that makes you feel heard. For this one, I am saying Will Wheaton's memoir/autobiography, Just a Geek. Unflinching, honest tales of search for life, love, and fulfillment beyond the Starship Enterprise. To an extent, this is just pulled from his blog, but some of it's written specifically for the book, and then of course he edited and compiled to be a coherent story. Obviously, I am not Will Wheaton. I was not an actor on Star Trek, though I'd love to have been. And obviously, I'm not a man, but I feel so heard from this, not only because I am a geek and a Star Trek nerd, I am a Trekkie, live long and prosper, but also because he talks about dealing with mental health, struggling with depression, and he talks about his history of child abuse. And unfortunately, I can really relate to that. I've always been a huge fan of Will Wheaton, and reading this made me connect to him more, and it definitely made me feel heard. Number 6, Death. Pick a book that has forever changed you. For this one, I am going to pick Calculating God by Robert J. Sawyer. It's not what it seems. It's not a religious book. This is true hard science fiction. This was published in the year 2000, so when I discovered it, it was brand new. This was probably just released as a paperback when I got it. It has seen better days. I've read it so many times. This is the story about a dying paleontologist who is found and visited by aliens from 2 different species who are on their way to find the god of this universe, the oldest being who had something to do with the universe's creation, possibly, or maybe just survived the Big Bang from the previous one. They're off to find this being, to look upon it, to see if it will acknowledge them. And their races, on their planets, their cultures, religion, belief in God, and science are intermingled. One cannot exist without the other. They're fascinated to find a society where that is not true. There's also a whole lot of other things they find fascinating. Like the main alien, Hollis, is similar to a gigantic spider with crab eye thingies. And she's fascinated when our human paleontologist can stand on one foot, because if she does that, if she puts all her weight on the limbs on one side, she'll just fall over. Humorous things like that. And so that's a fascinating concept, but also there's this subplot going on with these criminals that are trying to break into the museum and destroy paleontology artifacts. They're religious fanatics. They think that fossil evidence of beings that were alive on Earth before us invalidates the creation theory, and therefore they must be fake, so they have to be destroyed. So there's both of those plots going on. Absolutely fascinating book. This changed me because this was my introduction to adult level hard science fiction. Year 2000 when this came out, I was 12, and up to this point I was reading fantasy, high fantasy, and I was reading science fiction space opera, mostly Star Wars and Star Trek. I had not yet picked up a hard sci-fi. This was my first one. I was actually looking for the 3rd book in the Chronicles of the Unbinding by Robert S. Stone, which was never written. Something's happened to that guy. I'm pretty sure he's dead. And very small bookstore, science fiction and fantasy in the same group. Robert S. Stone, Robert J. Sawyer, they were side by side, and after several trips not finding the book I was looking for, I picked up this one. You know, the rest is history. I have every book he has ever written. I love him. I follow him. I pre-order his books when he announces them now. And actually, now that I'm on NetGalley, I will probably start ARC reading for him for the next one. Number 7, The Devil. Pick a character that makes you scream because of how frustrating they are. I'm gonna hold up just the first book, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, but I mean the entire trilogy. Katniss Everdeen. She has her moments. She's definitely a heroine sometimes. She's well suited to survive the Hunger Games for sure. She's not good at relationships. She's not good at picking up what everybody else is laying down. She's not good at pretending to be in a relationship, even though that's gonna save her and Peeta. When she finally catches feels for Peeta, his memory's been erased, and most of the time that she's working with District 13, she's not making the best decisions. She's being a pawn, and she's being a rebellious one at that. And then, of course, like, you've heard me rant about the way this trilogy wrapped up. Katniss. The right character to follow in the games, frustrating character to follow for everything else. Number 8, The Tower. Pick a book that destroys a certain stereotype. You may be expecting me to pick Blades of Black down here by L.L. McKinney, and I'm sure it does destroy a stereotype. Look at this beautiful, fierce black woman who's going down the rabbit hole and going to do some different things in Wonderland. But I haven't read it yet. This is one of 3 books that are going to be my absolute next must-reads when I take a break from ARC reading. Since I haven't read it yet, I have to pick something else. I say Wicked by Gregory Maguire. This absolutely destroys the stereotype, the trope that the Wicked Witch and characters like her are just evil for the sake of being evil. This is her backstory. This is why she is the way she is. This also just uncovers how some of the other characters are not as good as they appear. Shows how the Wicked Witch of the East, her sister, is actually much more evil, and why. It makes her a very empathetic character, and I love it. Number 9, The Star. Pick an inspirational book. I have no idea where the dust jacket went for this. This is Always Looking Up by Michael J. Fox. It's not the first one he wrote. I believe the first one was Lucky Man. This is just kind of a continuation on those thoughts. It's one of his memoirs. If you're not familiar with Michael J. Fox, he's very famous for Spin City, for Back to the Future, and several other things. And he has Parkinson's disease, so it makes it very difficult for him to act these days because he doesn't have control over what his body's doing. Maybe in the future that'll be less of a problem because Hollywood is waking up to the fact that disabled people need representation. This was an interesting read. This is one of his memoirs. Like, Lucky Man talks about when he first started showing symptoms and when he was diagnosed and coming to terms with it. This is after that. This is him living with it and living despite of it. There's a part in here where it talks about a role that he took just as a challenge, just to see if he could act entire scenes without uncontrollably twitching. The subtitle is The Adventures of an Incurable Optimist. I highly recommend reading any of Michael J. Fox's memoirs if you want to be inspired by a very strong, very positive man. Also, fun fact, I know most of the time you see big Hollywood names, you expect that they're American. He's not. He's Canadian. He grew up in Burnaby. He went to the same high school that my father attended. They're 5 years apart, so they were never in the school at the same time. And his big black dog that he had when he was in Spin City and a little bit after that, I can't remember if it was a Labrador or if it was a Newfoundland dog, but it was a Canadian dog. It was a big black dog, and it was named Burnaby to remind him of home. Always loved that special little connection there. Finally, number 10, The Sun. What author do you hope becomes a household name because of how awesome their work is? This is Shannon Patrick Sullivan. This is his debut novel, The Dying Days. I have talked about this one before. This guy is from right here in St. John's, Newfoundland. He was actually my calculus professor at Memorial University of Newfoundland. And yeah, debut novel. It's urban fantasy. Basically, cities have memories. If you know how to access those memories, you can access pathways and buildings and all that kind of stuff that isn't there anymore. And in doing so, you uncover the true magical underbelly of the city. And this main character is getting into a lot of trouble trying to help solve a plot going on in the magical hidden underbelly. I really hope that eventually this gets picked up. This is published by Killick Press, which is just a local regional press. I want this picked up by something bigger, or for Killick to push it bigger. I want everybody to read this. I want him to publish his sequel. I know he was working on one. I asked him about it during his office hours one day way back in 2012, and he said he had a sequel that he was working on. Been 8 years, but he's a busy man. But this book, this was an amazing urban fantasy debut novel. It's also real great Canadian fiction. I really want more from him, and I want more people to know about him. Thank you so much, Mariah M, for tagging me, and thank you everybody who has told me that I can tag you. Again, if you've told me that you want to be tagged and I'm not saying your name today, be patient. I'm only saying a few names each tag, and your name is coming. Today I am going to tag Read with Ansu, Lit Nana, Plums and Books, and Loud Reading Things. I look forward to seeing what you guys do with this one if you haven't done it already. If you have, just let me know where your existing video or blog post or whatever is when I tag you over on Twitter. And if you want to tag me in a tag, or if you want to be tagged, just let me know. Let's have some more fun. I put out videos here every Saturday and some Mondays, and I'll see you in the next one.